In an increasingly interconnected world, economic sanctions have become a weapon of choice for nations seeking to influence the behavior of others. These sanctions are not just about freezing assets or halting trade, they are a strategic tool used to exert pressure without resorting to military force. The goal is to create economic hardship that compels the targeted nation to alter its policies or actions. These measures, ranging from targeted asset freezes to full-blown trade embargoes, are designed to inflict economic pain and pressure governments to change course. Asset freezes can cripple the financial capabilities of key individuals and institutions, while trade embargoes can disrupt entire economies by cutting off essential goods and services. Recent years have witnessed a surge in the use of sanctions, from the West's response to Russia's actions in Ukraine to ongoing tensions between the United States and China. The conflict in Ukraine has seen a myriad of sanctions aimed at isolating Russia economically, while the trade war between the US and China has involved tariffs and restrictions that have affected global markets. This rise of economic warfare is reshaping global trade patterns, forcing countries to reassess alliances and raising profound questions about the future of the international order. Nations are now more cautious about their trade dependencies and are seeking to diversify their economic partnerships to mitigate the risks of sanctions. The increasing use of sanctions reflects a shift in the global balance of power and the nature of conflict itself. Economic power is becoming as crucial as military might, and countries are leveraging their economic strengths to achieve geopolitical goals. Traditional military interventions are costly and fraught with risk, while sanctions offer a seemingly more precise and less bloody tool of statecraft. They allow nations to apply pressure without the immediate human cost of war, making them an attractive option for policymakers. However, the effectiveness of sanctions is a subject of intense debate. Economists and international relations experts often find themselves at odds over whether sanctions achieve their intended outcomes or merely create additional suffering. While proponents argue that they can alter the calculus of authoritarian regimes and deter aggression, critics point to their humanitarian consequences and questionable track record in achieving desired political outcomes. Sanctions can lead to shortages of food, medicine, and other essential goods, disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable populations. Moreover, there are instances where sanctions have failed to bring about significant policy changes, leading to prolonged suffering without achieving the intended diplomatic goals. Historical examples provide a mixed picture. Some sanctions have successfully pressured governments to negotiate or change course, while others have entrenched regimes and exacerbated human suffering. The debate continues as to whether the benefits of sanctions outweigh their costs, and whether they are the most effective tool for achieving international peace and security. As the world moves forward, the role of economic warfare will likely continue to evolve. Emerging economic powers and shifting alliances will shape the future landscape of international relations. The challenge for global leaders will be to balance the use of sanctions with the need to maintain humanitarian standards and promote long-term stability. Sanctions are not a one-size-fits-all tool. They exist on a spectrum, ranging in severity and scope. At the lower end are targeted sanctions, such as travel bans on specific individuals, or asset freezes on political elites. These measures aim to apply pressure on key decision-makers while minimizing collateral damage to the broader population. Further up the ladder are sectoral sanctions, which target specific industries or sectors of a country's economy. For example, restricting access to technology or financial markets can cripple key industries and exert significant economic pressure. The most extreme form of economic sanction is a full trade embargo, which effectively cuts off a country from the global economy. This blunt instrument can have devastating consequences for civilian populations, leading to shortages of essential goods, hyperinflation, and economic collapse. The decision to impose sanctions, particularly those with far-reaching consequences, requires careful consideration of the potential humanitarian impact and the likelihood of achieving the desired political objectives. The use of sanctions as a tool of statecraft is not new. For centuries, nations have wielded economic measures as a means to exert influence and achieve political objectives without resorting to military conflict. These economic tools have evolved over time, adapting to the changing landscape of global politics and international relations. History is replete with examples of nations attempting to influence the behavior of others through economic pressure. Sanctions can take many forms, including trade embargoes, asset freezes, and restrictions on financial transactions. Each type of sanction aims to create economic hardship for the target nation, thereby compelling it to alter its policies or actions. From the Athenian blockade of Megara in the 5th century BC to the Napoleonic Wars and the Allied blockade of Germany during World War I, economic warfare has long been a feature of international relations. These historical examples highlight the enduring nature of economic sanctions as a strategic tool. The Athenian blockade, for instance, was an early demonstration of how economic pressure could be used to weaken an adversary without direct military engagement. In the 20th century, the League of Nations sanctions against Italy following its invasion of Ethiopia in 1935 marked an early attempt at using collective economic pressure to enforce international law. Although these sanctions were ultimately ineffective in stopping Italy's aggression, they set a precedent for the use of multilateral sanctions as a means of maintaining international order. The Cold War era saw the widespread use of sanctions, primarily by the United States and its allies against the Soviet Union and its satellite states. These measures were part of a broader strategy to contain the spread of communism and protect Western interests. Sanctions during this period were often accompanied by diplomatic efforts and military alliances, creating a multifaceted approach to international relations. These measures, often imposed in response to human rights abuses or attempts to destabilize Western interests, had mixed results. While they undoubtedly imposed economic costs, they rarely led to significant policy changes. The effectiveness of sanctions during the Cold War was often limited by the ability of targeted nations to find alternative sources of economic support, whether through domestic means or alliances with other countries. While they undoubtedly imposed economic costs, they rarely led to significant policy changes. The resilience of targeted nations and their ability to adapt to economic hardships often blunted the impact of sanctions. However, the economic distress caused by these measures did contribute to broader geopolitical shifts, including the eventual weakening of the Soviet Union's economic foundation. The collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War ushered in a brief period of optimism about the potential for international cooperation and a decline in the use of economic coercion. The early 1990s saw a renewed focus on diplomacy and multilateralism, with many hoping that the end of the Cold War would lead to a more stable and cooperative international order. However, the post-Cold War world has proven to be no less prone to conflict, and the use of sanctions has seen a resurgence in recent decades. The rise of new global powers, ongoing regional conflicts, and the increasing interconnectedness of the global economy have all contributed to the continued relevance of economic sanctions. Today, sanctions are used not only to address traditional security concerns, but also to combat issues such as terrorism, nuclear proliferation, and human rights abuses. As the world continues to grapple with complex geopolitical challenges, the role of sanctions in shaping international relations remains as significant as ever. The imposition of sanctions inevitably triggers a process of adaptation and realignment in the global economy. These sanctions, often aimed at curbing the actions of a particular nation, can ripple through the international market, causing shifts that affect not just the targeted country but the entire global economic landscape. Targeted countries often seek to mitigate the impact of sanctions by forging new trade partnerships, diversifying their economies, and developing alternative financial systems. This proactive approach helps them to not only survive but sometimes even thrive under the new constraints. By seeking out new allies and markets, these nations can find innovative ways to sustain their economies. Russia's response to Western sanctions following its annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the subsequent invasion of Ukraine in 2022 provides a compelling case study. These events have forced Russia to rethink its economic strategies and look beyond its traditional partners in the West. Facing unprecedented economic pressure, Moscow has deepened its ties with China, creating a robust economic partnership that has seen significant growth in trade volumes. This relationship has become a cornerstone of Russia's strategy to counteract the effects of Western sanctions. Increased trade with India and other emerging economies, which have become crucial partners in Russia's efforts to diversify its economic dependencies. These countries offer new markets and opportunities, helping Russia to stabilize its economy amidst the sanctions, and sought to reduce its reliance on the US dollar in international transactions. By promoting the use of alternative currencies and financial systems, Russia aims to insulate itself from the financial mechanisms controlled by the West. This adaptation process is not limited to the targeted country. The global economy as a whole must adjust to the new realities created by sanctions. Businesses and governments worldwide need to navigate the changing landscape, finding new ways to operate and thrive. Sanctions can also have unintended consequences for third-party states, which may find themselves caught in the crossfire of economic warfare. These countries often have to make difficult decisions about their own economic and political alignments, forcing them to navigate complex geopolitical calculations and potentially choose sides. The pressure to align with one bloc or another can lead to significant shifts in international relations, as countries weigh the benefits and risks of their choices. For example, European countries heavily reliant on Russian energy imports have faced difficult choices in balancing their support for Ukraine with their own energy security needs. The need to secure alternative energy sources has led to a reevaluation of energy policies and partnerships. The imposition of sanctions can thus act as a catalyst for broader geopolitical shifts, prompting countries to reassess their alliances and strategies. These shifts can lead to new power dynamics and influence the global order in unexpected ways, accelerating the formation of new alliances and reshaping the global balance of power. As countries adapt to the new economic realities, they form new partnerships that can redefine international relations and create a more multipolar world.